You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Join Steve and his guests every week as he staggers from Georgia to Maine.
Hey guys, it's me again, Mighty Blue, and you're listening to episode number 326 of the podcast, which is Mighty Blue on the Appalachian Trail, the ultimate midlife crisis. Today, I think we've got a real treat for you. After I hiked the West Highland Way earlier this year, I kind of kept in touch with that trail, reading people's posts on Facebook and seeing their pictures. And by the way, they're nowhere near as vindictive and nasty as some of the AT Facebook pages, so think on. These posts really took me back there, I'll tell you. Anyway, one of the posts particularly grabbed my attention. It was by a pair of hikers, father and daughter. When I read that it was about their journey from the very north to the very south of mainland UK, taken in the West Highland Way as part of that hike, I got especially intrigued, not least because I knew that our Spectrum adventures must have something to do with autism. As you'll hear when we talk, I didn't know the half of it. Ian is our guest today and he'll be along shortly. Also today, we catch up with one of the surviving Mighty Blue class of 2022, Dom Tamarro. Dom was heading home for 5 days, but by the time you hear this, he'll be back at it, still heading north and enjoying it. Then we'll have the first half of Chapter 3 of George Stephanos' Then the Howl Came, where George and his buddy are battling through the Smokies. So let's meet Ian, and even though we don't hear from her, his daughter Eve permeates the whole conversation. Here's Ian and Eve. So today's guest, Ian Alderman, came to my attention when I was still going down the West Highland Way rabbit hole after I'd finished my hike. He appeared with his daughter Eve on the West Highland Way Facebook page, and they have a unique story. So I invited Ian to come on the show. Hey Ian, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Well, I'm good, thanks. And, you know, I always do this. We have a conversation yesterday and I had a few notes to make. And then I started checking out your social media and so on. And I found out something I had absolutely no idea from talking to you yesterday. Your Facebook and YouTube pages and channels are all called My Spectrum Adventures. And when I started looking through them, I'd assumed that your daughter Eve was the person referred to as on the spectrum or autistic. But one of your videos said that you are also autistic. So for the benefit, for my benefit and for the audience benefit, what are the differing degrees of being on the spectrum?
Well, the differing degrees. Being a spectrum, it's kind of unique. So everyone who's on the spectrum has a unique set of characteristics.
Interesting.
So it's not kind of one size fits all, because everyone is unique. I mean, a lot of people don't know, for example, that Elon Musk is on the spectrum. So, I mean, it just shows a sort of variety of people that are on it. It's not all the traditional Rain Man and
I think that's the worst thing that ever happened to people being on spectrum, seeing Rain Man. I mean, yeah. And he was a very particular sort of person. So how does it manifest itself in you, Ian, and how does it manifest itself in Eve?
Well, with Eve, and myself, probably the biggest side of it is the social side of it. So communicating with others, talking to others, in general, the whole social side of life, being able to read stuff, saying the appropriate things at the appropriate times, and all that sort of stuff. Eve tends to go into.
And by the way, you have the added handicap of being British. We always blurt out stuff we shouldn't do, don't we?
Well, yeah. There is the We don't always say stuff as it should be or as people expect. There is an element of, I suppose, of British talk kicks in there as well. It makes it somehow worse to people who aren't quite used to some of the social norms from the UK. But
what about Eve? Tell us about Eve. Yeah,
it's just with Eve as well. It's the social side. It's lack of communication, lack of ability to communicate effectively and read social situations. And with Eve, her emotions can be on a knife's edge, even on a good day. So it's always almost like treading on eggshells a wee bit with her constantly. But obviously, tying in with all your the nature of your podcasts, etc., being in the whole outdoors is kind of her happy place. It's just where she comes out of a shell and she's a totally different child to
How
parent.
interesting. Why do you think that is, Ian? Have you thought about why that might be?
To be honest, we don't really know. It's just when she's in the house, she's awesome, she's easy, but everything's generally harder. But getting her into the outdoors, getting her into not just hiking, but anything, whether it be climbing, canoeing, kayaking, going out doing bushcraft, building fires, dens, rain, sleet or snow, she is a different child, period. I mean, fundamentally different. Her emotions, everything. No, nothing's perfect. I mean, it doesn't get rid of the autism and etc. But it's like the outdoors is a natural medicine. I don't want to use medicine, or very carefully use that word medicine when talking with autism. Yeah. But do you know what I mean? It's like the best medicine you can give to, well, anybody, but her in particular. And it kind of feeds into both myself and Sarah in our lives as well, because being outdoors is just what works for us as individuals and as a family. We're never better than when we're outside.
So do you also feel better as well being outdoors?
Yeah, without a doubt.
How
absolutely. Okay. Without a doubt.
And and I don't even know whether you know the answer to this, is Eve aware of differences? In that way?
Yes. She is. I mean, she goes to like brownies and various other social clubs, and she's keen to be social. Autism isn't about not wanting to be social. It's about wanting to be social, but not having the skills to be social. Okay. So, I mean, she goes and she wants to do all this stuff. She wants to have the friends and go to the parties and all this sort of stuff. And,
sure.
But she doesn't really have all the social skills to be able to do it and manage the intricacies of human social interaction, as well as someone who's neurotypical. So she does want to. It's just she struggles to be able to do that, which is why if you'll ever meet her, which lots of people have done, you'll not usually get much out of her unless she thinks you're not listening, or your back's turned, or you're well away, and she thinks it's just me and her, and then she'll open up, and she'll normally open up and say the most inappropriate thing going, but it's a logical question. It's always like, is that a boy or a girl? And do you know what I mean? It's really sort of like, oh God, cringeworthy stuff. But you're not that way. I didn't even know from talking to you yesterday that you were. So that's what I talked about, the different levels, I guess, and I wasn't aware of it yesterday. But let's kind of move on from that, because I want to, as I mentioned, you've also, like I have, recently completed the West Highland Way. And I'd imagine that in itself was quite an accomplishment for both the two of you. But there is so much more to your hiking journey, isn't there? Tell the listeners your plan and how much you've done. Well, the plan of what we're doing currently, or I say halfway through, we're not even halfway through. We're walking the entire length of mainland Great Britain. So from the furthest northerly point of Scotland all the way through to the most southerly point of England via John O'Groats to Land's End, and it equates to about 1,300 miles. So, I mean, in terms of stuff like the Appalachian Trail, it's relatively small, but some of the challenges with this particular challenge is somewhat different, because there's no defined route, there's no path, it's all map reading, navigation, compass work, yada. So it's a different sort of challenge. It encompasses a lot more, like I say, the navigation, so logistics. It's a lot more. It's not a structure. There isn't the infrastructure there. The paths aren't defined. It's all going across hills, and you can link in paths and known trails, the West Highland Way being one of them. But
so that was almost easier for you then, wasn't it? Because it was actually a defined path. Right,
yeah, the West Highland Way is easy. I was looking forward to getting onto that bit and doing that bit for a bit of a break, because it's just kind of there, and there's campsites and there's shops and there's honesty boxes and I suppose, I think in America you call it all like trail magic and all this sort of stuff. It kind of is on the West Highland Way, but for the majority of it there isn't. and obviously the laws are somewhat different, with wild camping not being allowed, so it's a lot more, you have to be a lot more sneaky with camping and etc, etc, etc. So yeah, it's a different challenge. But as anyone knows that's ever done a long walk, even just a reasonable distance, just over a number of days, it soon turns from being a physical challenge into a mental challenge. And that ties again in with the autism, because the mental challenges is where autistic people tend to have a weakness or an absolute strength that goes beyond what most people can do.
And you're seeing that in Eve, are you? That she's really grown into this so much that she's just kind of got into it.
Oh, Eve's absolutely obsessed. I mean, the outdoors is her thing. I mean, she's got a picture or a big poster above her bed of Mount Everest, and it's the first thing she sees when she goes to sleep, first thing she sees when she wakes up, and that's her goal. She wants to go up Mount Everest, and she's already been on like online forum things where she's been selected, and she's spoken to Sherpas from Everest, and she actually talks to these people. And there's a group that's actually got started by a Indian doctor who links in with all the Sherpas over in over at Mount Everest, and it's all to do with females and all female teams that go up Everest who otherwise couldn't, because like this Indian doctor, she came from, I don't know all the geography of it, one of these places where during a menstrual cycle she would have been put in a shed and told that she was the demon and you're filthy, and do you know what I mean? So she left the family, become a doctor, which is contrary to all what should have happened, and she's done Everest and all these other challenges, and she recruits people from all over the world, only sort of odd individuals, to try to bring them all in and hopefully in time put together all female teams to go up Everest and other stuff. And Eve's getting linked in with all of that. So
Eve has definitely got that in her mind, isn't she? Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. So you've done so far. You told me you actually completed Scotland the other day, and most Brits would think Land's End to John O'Groats, but you've gone for the most northerly part, which is, what's it called? Dunnet Head. I can't remember. Dunnet Head, and the most southerly part is
Lizard Point.
To Lizard Point, that's right, because Lizard Point is the most southerly part of Britain. And so far, you've just completed Scotland in its entirety, haven't you? Yeah,
we've done all of Scotland, so we've got a continual chain of footsteps from the most northerly point.
That's awesome.
Going into England. So so we've done Scotland.
So let's step back a bit, knowing now that you're also autistic, and that really did inform more of my questions, actually. Tell us how you met your wife, Sarah, because that was also a love of the outdoors, wasn't it?
We met originally climbing in the Peak District, and we were both out there rock climbing, and it was all through a mountaineering club, and we ended up meeting. We knew each other for a good number of years before any sort of relationship developed. We were just acquaintances, friends, and so on and so forth. And eventually we ended up, getting together.
And then you had Eve.
The rest is history. Then we had Eve.
And then you had Eve. When did you realise that she may also be autistic? And was it likely, you being an autistic father? I mean, I just don't know these things, so I'm asking out of complete ignorance.
Well, Sarah is by trade a high school teacher. Now, she doesn't work as a high school teacher anymore. She gave that up a number of years ago, but she's got professional training and experience of working with people on the spectrum and other conditions, demented conditions. So she kind of knows about all this stuff. So the question of me being on the spectrum from her has been around for well over a decade, but I've always sort of got rid of it and said no, and I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole. I don't want to do that. I don't have my medical records because of the sort of jobs I was working in, etc., etc. And obviously we had Eve, and she displayed a lot of traits that are quintessentially autistic, so we ended up going down the route of getting a diagnosis, or potentially a diagnosis, because obviously that's down to the medical professionals, but go down the route of getting her diagnosed, which it come back quite a resounding yes. And at roughly the same sort of time, I decided that I would agree and go through the National Health Service and see whether indeed I was on the spectrum.
Right.
And that came back as quite a resounding yes. But in all honesty, I went more for my diagnosis basically to try and prove Sarah wrong. It wasn't a case of going thinking I'm going to go and get it.
Always dangerous thing to try to prove your wife wrong.
Always. And I well and truly got egg on my face. So that backfired because it came at quite a large resounding yes. So I mean, even if someone asks me, "Are you autistic?" I say yes because it's true, and I am, and everything fits, and it does make a lot of my life. It does make sense of a lot of things that have happened in my life and how I am and who I am and all that sort of stuff.
Sure. But
I also don't necessarily. Some people being autistic is like a lifestyle, but and it does affect you in every part of your existence. But I don't want it to define me.
And do you know what? That's exactly my next question. It was about Eve. You didn't want to limit Eve in any way, did you?
No.
You talked to me yesterday about doing big things. So tell us how you feel about that, because this is really important part of it. The fact that you are autistic yourself, as I say, which colours my questions in many ways, because you thought enough about this to think, well, I'm not going to limit my daughter on this. So what does it mean to you doing big things?
Well, it's kind of that. She is on the spectrum. She's going to have to deal with that for all of her life.
Sure.
So, and she's also home educated, so she doesn't go to school.
Right.
So we have the benefit of time. So we haven't got to just worry about school time. So we do the whole home education stuff while we're actually on the trail. So I carry tablets and educational resources with me in my backpack. So when we're walking, we can do it in the evenings, in the tent, etc., etc.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, being autistic, people and make allowances for that, and it's all very nice. But also, we want her to be able to try to develop and not be limited by it.
Cool.
So we still want her to be able to socially interact, to be able to push herself, to be able to develop her particular strengths.
But isn't the trail a great way to do that? Because you meet everybody on the West Highland Way, for example. I met tons of people, and it was never ever anything other than a positive experience, was it? Yeah. Did you find that with the people you met in the hiking community on the West Highland Way as well?
Well, not just the West Highland Way, the entire thing, because we originally did a social media page on Facebook, and it was simply a diary for home education, and it sort of developed into what it is, and we've got a good few thousand followers now, etc., etc.
Sure.
And when we started this walk and we started talking about it, we never in a million years imagined the sort of support, following messages we'd get, help, support. It's just genuinely, hand on heart, blown our minds, because we never ever thought, even talking to you now is like, it just feels surreal, the fact that we're doing this, yet we're getting people like yourself contacting us, and there's magazine articles being written, apparently there's TV stuff potentially happening, etc., etc. So, and it's absolutely mental. I never suspected this in a million years, so it's kind of caught us all off guard, and it has pushed us into the public eye a bit more than I anticipated, which is good, which is fine, which is what I wanted, more so than I anticipated. So yes, we're having to confront being recognised all over the place, walking down the street when we're on the trail.
That's amazing.
People are sort of, you can see them talking between themselves when they see us and saying, we recognise you, and are you the people doing the walk? And it's weird, it's odd, it's surreal, and we get people out messengers saying, can we walk with you for a bit, can we meet up with you, can we post this out to you, can we do this? And we're having stuff coming from Canada, from America, from China, from Japan, from all over, contacting us and sending us stuff and wanting to more information, offering us help, and it's turning virtually into a full-time occupation, because it's so much time is being put into not just the walking, but the logistics around it and how everyone else is interacting with us. So I mean, poor old Sarah, I think, has probably got it harder, because at least when we go out and we're walking, we don't have a mobile phone signal most of the time. The best we've got is a Garmin InReach, so we can message each other. But Sarah's constantly, literally hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of messages she's having to respond to constantly. And we try to respond to absolutely every single person in some way. But it's becoming a challenge. It's genuinely becoming hard work.
I'm sure it is. And I know that you thought, in being an outdoorsy guy anyway, you always had the idea of doing a long hike. And I know that the three of you, including Sarah, went on the West Highland Way in 2020. Then the UK lockdowns took you off the trail.
Yeah.
So tell everybody why Sarah couldn't share the longer walk with you now.
Well, Sarah can walk, but she can't walk particularly far over a long period of time because a few years ago Sarah had cancer, and she had quite an aggressive form of melanoma, so skin cancer, but she had it all over her feet and that. So she had several operations and skin grafts, and her feet got messed up quite a lot. I mean, so she can't walk particularly well, particularly long, without a lot of pain and distress and stuff developing on her feet where the skin grafts are, etc., etc. So there's that, and there's also, she used to be a raft guide, and she had some clients in her raft that were, I think, a bit challenging, and there was a bit of an incident with a flip or something like that. I'm not totally sure myself, to be honest, and basically she ended up getting jammed in it and dislocated her knees, so she's had operations on them as well. So coupled with the knees and her feet means that she's not really able to pound out mile after mile after mile, day after day after day, over bogs and rocks and God knows what else. She just can't do it.
And I know that she's also not the only one who's had cancer in your family, is she? Because you told me that Eve, at a young age, had a tumour.
Yeah, when Eve was one,
and there was a possibility she wouldn't make it.
Yeah, when she was one, she had the hospital found a tumour on her spine, and it was pushing against the actual spinal column. And yeah, we got taken into the family room by all the consultants and doctors and told we wouldn't be taking her home and you're moving on to palliative care, basically.
Oh my gosh.
They scanned her. It was connected to one of the universities, so they called over the professors and that, because it was quite unique, quite rare. They hadn't really seen all this sort of stuff much, etc. And they tried various treatments, and luckily it worked. And they sorted her out, basically, and the rest is history, so to speak. And one of the best things is she doesn't remember much about it.
Of course,
because she's so
1 years
young.
old. Yeah, that's
right. But Eve and Sarah were both. Sarah was going through her cancer treatment, and Eve was in hospital at the same time. So it all happened at the same time. So
the fact that you do any hiking at all, Ian, is a bloody miracle as far as I'm concerned. And what you're taking on is quite something. And I've spoken to a couple of mother and son and father and daughter pairs recently. Does Eve participate in the planning of your trips? Because she's obviously interested, isn't she?
Yeah.
Do you act as joint hikers, or you're the dad and she's the daughter? But how do you look at that relationship?
Eve is involved, and we encourage her to get involved, and we want her to. So she sits down with us with the map spread out, and what does this symbol mean? What does that? And working out routes and paths and all that sort of stuff. And so, yeah, she's actively involved. We encourage her to be actively involved, not just from the hiking perspective, but the whole home education stuff, because you can integrate core skills of maths and English into all this sort of stuff really quite easily. So, yeah, she's involved with it at all times and in all ways. Now, being 8 years old, she maybe comes up with ideas that maybe not as good in practice, because it is thinking, let's go over that mountain, when in actual fact it's probably not a good idea when you can see the contour lines so close together, and do you know what I mean? And it's just sort of but she wants to do all this stuff. So I mean, obviously we're quite blessed living in Scotland, the fact we do have all mountains, so we do take her up, we do the Munros and all this sort of stuff.
She reads the maps as well? She does. And she knows how to do all the orientation, and she knows how to take grid references, and how to obviously handrail and all the other sort of various technical, well, not so technical, but all the other sort of techniques you can use when you're navigating and stuff like that. So yeah, she's got. I don't know whether I'd necessarily give it all to her on a wet, windy, misty Scottish mountain and say, "There you go, get us back to the car." But you know what I mean. She's got a good grounding. She's got a good grounding, and she's definitely keen to learn. And you had intended, when you started this trip, to wild camp kind of most of the time, because in Scotland you kind of can a lot of the time, can't you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but you can't in England so much, I know.
No.
So, but you haven't actually had to do as much wild camping as you thought, have you?
No, no. Well, it's kind of we were only planning it, doing a load of planning today. Me and Sarah sat down, and we've actually stopped and trying to integrate more camping, because we've had so many offers of help and support, and we'll do this, we'll do that for you, that it's almost rendering camping kind of obsolete. We don't kind of need to, and it's kind of, well, we want to. It's kind of, so we're actually at the point of saying thank you very much. Maybe we'll delay it and stuff, just so we can try and get a few more nights under canvas and in the actual tent. I mean, there was some times right at the beginning when we were in Scotland at the beginning of March where the weather was genuinely so brutal. Even the best tents in the world, I think, would have struggled to really stay up and make it comfortable with 60, 70 mile an hour gusts and not being able to put your pegs in properly because the ground's so tusky. And so it was a challenge. So we did happily accept some of the offers of help and support then. But I mean, obviously now in the sort of the better weather, we're still getting all the offers, which is awesome. And we always said on this walk, we try and meet as many people as we can, expecting at best maybe a dozen or so. But I mean, it's literally 100. So we're trying to take people up on offers, but also think, in actual fact, maybe say no to some of them, just so we can try and give Eve some of the camping, backpacking experience that we were talking about before we actually got onto the trail.
Sure. And how does she react to that? Does she see the camping as an integral part of the trip, or is she really enjoying the thing of getting into people's houses and whatever you're doing, to get off the trail?
I think it's probably a bit of both. I think after a long, hard day, when she's got soaking wet feet, she's cold and she's wet, she still I mean, she keeps me going. If there's a weak point, it's me. It's not her, it's me. And so she, and I think it's good. It is nice, and she appreciates it. But the amount of time she's asking, when are we going to be camping? Can we use the tent and all this sort of stuff? Because she likes it. She wants to do all this stuff. So I think she does want to do it, and she does want to do it more, because we've spoken about it such a lot about camping, spent so much time getting kit ready and trying to reduce pack weight and all this sort of stuff. And then all of a sudden we're in accommodation and we're doing this and we're getting picked up and dropped off, which is lovely. And at the beginning we needed it, in all honesty, because it was brutal out there. But now it's kind of, we kind of want to, and Eve's asking to do it. So yeah, it's trying to get a happy medium of trying to keep as many people happy, meet as many people as we can to push what we're trying to do and increase our following and all that sort of good stuff. But also thinking that ultimately I've got an 8-year-old girl here that wants her own kind of experience. So, and we're led by her, which is why the mileage probably isn't as high on a daily basis as some people.
It's no race, Ian.
Exactly,
it's no race,
exactly.
Is it?
No, it's not.
The experience for your daughter of growing up, living part of the time in the outdoors like this, I just think is extraordinary. And you've already said that she thrives outdoors. Do you see, because you've done this on a quite extended period now, between March and June, do you see changes in her in even just the 3 months you've been hiking in Scotland?
Yes, in terms of, well, physically, yes, she's stronger, faster, more dynamic. There's more emotional resilience, emotional security, stability. She's less likely to cry and break down. I mean, everything's just better. Like everything, her ability to learn, absorb information, everything. I mean, literally nothing short of everything. And her confidence around people, talking to people. Even if you just look on the videos that we've recorded and uploaded onto Facebook, look at them from the beginning of March to now, and you'll see the difference in Eve and how she's...
That's why I asked the question,
talking.
That's why I asked the question. She holds herself differently already.
Yeah, and she's actually taken hold of the camera now, and she's wanting to do it herself, and the whole sort of videos going into YouTube is also something we're going to develop further down the line. So yeah, she's absolutely loving it. She's developing into a fundamentally different child, and I do put that down to simply being outside, the people, the trail, the hiking. It's amazing, absolutely amazing.
And so what about you then, Ian? Do you, because you've had 3 months out on the trail now, does Sarah notice changes in you?
Oh God, I don't know, to be perfectly honest.
Or do you notice changes? Do you notice changes in you?
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I mean, because I've got, obviously still with the autism, that I've got major concerns and issues to do with my major issues are finding somewhere to wild camp, water issues, and resupply. They're my three Achilles heels, and it is getting a lot better doing that, managing that, and just being confident just to push on and manage all of that. So from those perspective, yeah, I feel a lot more happy and confident with hiking and walking and being in the outdoors than I ever did before. Some of that comes down to experience, and some of that comes down to just being pushed into the situation, because as we spoke about yesterday, when you're on the hillside, when you're on the trail, I mean, the United Kingdom's not a big country at all, certainly compared to America. I mean, we're titchy. So I mean, but even if I phone Sarah up at 7:00 at night and say I've got an issue, it's still going to take us 6-7 hours to drive to me. So like it or not, you've got to deal with it, and you've got to manage it. And I've got an 8-year-old child. I've got to keep my head about me. I can't just sit there and cry and just. Do you know what I mean? So and it does challenge you in so many ways. And if I could recommend one thing to anybody, it just to get out there and have a go, because to be honest, what's the worst that's going to happen? You're going to have a rough night. So what? Tomorrow's another day.
Yeah, you wake up the next day, you keep going forward, don't you?
Exactly.
It's what, everybody has problems on the trail. Yours must be magnified to a degree because of your being on the spectrum. But I suspect that you still face many of the same challenges we all do. And we all have to cope with those challenges, don't we?
Absolutely.
An obvious question, I guess, is how do you fund these adventures? Because you're not. Because you're homeschooling your daughter, and you're not currently working. I know you used to have a business. What's the plan? Or do you not have a plan? Do you wait till this over, then see what you're going to do then?
Well, financially, we're not wealthy, like at all. I mean, you read a lot of stories on the internet about people that have sold up and doing these adventures, and they were GPs and they were doctors and they were all the sort of professions where you earn a lot of money. I worked in a hotel and my wife worked at an outdoor centre. We were basically minimum wage, and we saved up some money over lockdown because we were still working. There was a furlough scheme in the UK, etc. So we managed to save up some money, and we've been wanting to do something big for a long time, but as we said yesterday, life got in the way and one thing or another. And eventually, after lockdown, we kind of thought, or Sarah kind of thought, it, we're just going to kind of do it. We're just going to kind of get out there and we're just going to do something. I do apologise. Yeah, I am so sorry.
No, not at all. No.
So, yeah. And so it was one of the hardest things to do, although my job, it was a dead-end job where there was no hope of prospects of promotion and all this sort of stuff. It was a job, and the work ethic I was brought up with was absolutely rock solid. You work, period, the end, no matter what. You just carry on. So to give it up was one of the hardest things to do, but gave up the job, using the money that we've got saved up to get Eve out on the trail, to have a go at doing something big, because we've always said we would and we wanted to, and Eve wants to, and she keeps asking about doing more. She's planning next year. So basically we're using some of the money we saved up over lockdown, and we're going to see how it goes. I mean, and because we haven't really got a timescale for when this is going to end. No. So it's just going to sort of see how it goes. We set up a GoFundMe.
I love that. I think it's terrific.
And that's so I mean obviously I'm on here with you talking, etc., but I mean in reality Sarah, who sits behind the scenes, is really the one that's making it happen or allowing it to happen. So the debt to her is one that I hope I can pay back, but I probably never will, but I'll certainly spend my life trying.
You've certainly paid it back to Eve already, so I wouldn't worry too much about that. Yeah.
So hopefully, and hopefully Eve will, even if she doesn't remember any of it, which I sincerely hope she does, the character building, into the sort of person we want her to be, I think is worth its weight in gold. Sure. So,
I quite agree. I absolutely agree.
Yeah.
So where next? Where do you go next?
I don't actually know where we're going to. I mean, we keep thinking about what we're going to be doing next year. Eve wants to do another walk, a bigger walk. Right. On this journey.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Where are you next? Because you've done Scotland, so you're now into England.
we're into England. We're currently on the Pennine Way, which basically cuts straight down the middle of England. Now, anyone that knows the Pennine Way or has watched videos on the Pennine Way, I mean, real videos, knows that the Pennine Way is basically just one big bog. It's muddy, it's slippy, it's wet, it's a bog from start to finish virtually. Now, that's probably doing it a bit of disjustice, but I mean, Sarah used to live near the Pennine Way, etc., so she'll certainly vouch for that, and the amount of people that can sink in the bogs up to the waist and stuff like that. I mean, it's crazy. Anyway, so we're on the Pennine Way. We're going down that. Now, we have made some deviations. We're not loyal to that actual trail. We're just using it as a blueprint to head south.
Sure.
So we're coming off bits of that. So we're going to cut straight through the middle of England, straight down, and then we'll get so far, roughly into the middle, and then we're going to cut across into Wales or onto the Welsh border.
Lovely.
So that way we can also go into Wales and do another country and cut down there. We're not in Wales for long, and then we go right into the south of England, which climate-wise is probably more similar to France by the time you look at you sort of look at it on the globe. So we're hoping for some pretty hot weather down there, to be honest. And then push on down to Land's End and then down to Lizard Point, which is a bit further on.
Well, look, Ian, I think you're giving your daughter a remarkable journey that I'm sure she'll remember forever. And I feel absolutely privileged to have the chance to talk to you today. And I really appreciate you coming on the show, and just hope that when you get there, you'll let us know and we'll get you back on and tell us the second half of your trip. Tell us what it was like then, okay?
Yeah, no, absolutely. It'd be absolutely brilliant. It's been really good actually talking. So yeah, thank you very much indeed, and thanks for inviting us. It's been amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate it. You take it easy, okay?
You take care then.
Cheers then.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye. As I often do when we finish recording, Ian and I carried on talking, and he actually hadn't finished. And he wanted to add one more thing. Here he is again. Funnily enough, we're back. Ian and I were just talking. So tell me what you just said, Ian.
We're just talking about originally the actual trail that we were thinking about doing or planning on doing before the whole COVID lockdown was the Appalachian Trail in America. We were actually looking at trying to come over and do that one, simply because it's, as far as I'm aware, the world's longest waymarked trail in the world. I mean, there are big ones, PCT and all that sort of stuff, but the Appalachian Trail is the biggest one, and it's the most social one by my understanding. So that was going to be the original one that we were going to try and do. So kind of doing the whole UK was kind of almost not a second thought, but it was it kind of made sense given the times that we're living in at the moment.
You've got to do your own country first.
Well, there is that as well. So we've got all the books and everything. We've got all the literature here sitting waiting, and we were going through it all. So you never know.
Well, who knows, Ian? In a couple of years' time, you might be on the show, you and Eve, telling me about how you finished the Appalachian Trail.
You never know.
And that
Hopefully.
would be a very, very cool thing.
It would be cool. Then we can meet face to face.
All right, then. We'll take it easy, all right?
And
cheers. Now, I know we're a show about usually the Appalachian Trail, but this is one of my favourite chats I've ever done. Can you imagine how tough that must be? And cards on the table, I don't understand fully the difficulties he's faced on this journey, yet I think he's been heroic. He's given his daughter a wonderful experience from which she is clearly thriving. It is awesome. And at the same time, he's raising awareness of what being on the spectrum means while not limiting what Eve can achieve. Just imagine, she could well end up climbing Everest. Bloody marvellous. Thanks as ever go to our donors. This week, our monthly donors are Jens Lipperheider, Lisa Rana, Brian Helton Jr., Erskine Bass and Natisha Webb. We also had individual donations from Stephen Brindle, Mary Louise Adams, no relation by the way, and Dennis Pack. As always, we couldn't do these shows without you, and I'm always grateful when I get notification of another donation. I never take them for granted. Please, if you feel like you're getting value from all these stories we bring you, head on over to the Hiking Radio Network website and click on one of the donate buttons. Thank you so much. Now let's catch up with Dom Tamarro. He's still heading north, though this week he's in a car. Let Dom explain. Hey Dom, how are you?
Good, Steve. How are you?
I'm good, and I know that you've gallantly made your way to a car park so we can speak. So you
Yes.
battled your way. You're driving for a graduation event. Is that correct?
Yes, that's true. That's correct.
Who's graduating then?
So I stepped down from my position to as a residency director to hike
Sure.
the AT, and so this is
Sure.
my group of senior residents who are graduating. So it's no one in my family. It's the group that I've watched kind of evolve into
How wonderful!
positions. Yeah.
How
so
wonderful! Yeah, that must be a particular pleasure to you.
It really is.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And I'll
I'm
get
sure.
to spend some time with my family as well.
So, how long are you off the trail then?
It'll be including travel. It'll be about 5 days total.
Oh, I'm not too bad then, because with a bit of luck, you won't lose your legs, which is the important bit. Because you're 500 miles in now, aren't you?
I just passed the 500-mile mark, right within Grayson Highlands.
And you know what? Even though you planned to do this and you wanted to do this, the mere fact of realizing you walked 500 miles, that is a long way, isn't it?
It is. It is. And, everyone says, oh, don't worry, Virginia levels out and stuff. But, Virginia, the Grayson Highlands, they call them Highlands for a reason. They're really high.
Yeah.
It's a big climb.
And it lovely though. Did you enjoy the Grayson Highlands?
Oh yeah. I mean, I had this snafu with my timing. I rented the car to go home, but I got to Damascus too early.
All right.
And so rather than just sit around, I got a ride up to Massey Gap, which is in the middle of Grayson Highlands.
Yes.
And I hiked 3 days southbound back to Damascus.
Nice. I bet that's lovely. Now I think about it, I bet that's a lovely hike as well. I mean, it's a lovely hike the other way, but I suspect it's a lovely hike southbound as well. Oh,
it was great, and it had this strange effect. I did not anticipate this. So because I'm a relatively slow hiker, I haven't really been hiking with a specific group. There's a few people that I've hiked with and camped with consistently, but no tramley as of yet. But as I was hiking southbound, I ran into all these people. It was like a greatest hits of all the friends that I've been hiking with. And they all were very concerned. They said, wait, you're coming back, right? Absolutely. I got to return the car, and so it was great to see everybody.
It's a bit of a schlep though, isn't it? It's a bit of a drive you've got. How far are you driving?
It is. Today I'm driving just to New York City to visit my brother, and then it's 3 hours back home. But on the way back, I'm going to do the whole thing in one go. I just don't want to waste any time. I feel, it's a little bit of me that feels like, oh boy, is this the right decision? But it totally is the right decision.
Yeah, you'll certainly feel that when you're there. But you do definitely interrupt the rhythm of your hike, and I've noticed that with a lot of people who've are in our class of 2022 this year. A lot of them haven't been able to get the rhythm going, unfortunately, and it just interrupts their hike, and it's difficult to get back into it. And various injuries and getting off for a couple of days and so on. But when you get back, your plan is to push straight forward. Then is it?
Yeah, I already have a ride arranged from the car rental place to Massey Gap, so I can pick up where I left off. Virginia is already my favorite state. I mean, I've only been in Virginia for 40 miles, and between Grayson Highlands, the view from Buzzard Rock, making 500 miles, it's a beautiful state. I'm looking forward.
I just realised I just realised when you said it that I referred to Buzzard Rock as Eagle Rock the other day. On the show, it was Buzzard Rock. It was Buzzard Rock. I meant, So you're how far are you into the drive by now? Then how far are you done?
Let's see. It's around 2:00 now. I'm due to get into my brother's house in New York at around 7.
Oh,
so I still got about 5 hours.
Yeah. Now, so what's been going on? I know you saw your first bear. Tell us about that.
Well, so I've been hiking a lot with this couple, Cough Drop and Dragonfly, And so we were hiking. It was just crossed into Virginia, and I crested a ridge, and Cough Drop was standing on the trail with his finger to his mouth to be hushed. And so I tiptoed as much as I can tiptoe, and there was a bear.
That's not a good visual, Dom.
Yeah, especially if I still have my heavy boots. But there was a bear off in the maybe about 30 yards off the trail. There was a looks like a mama bear and her cub, and they were pretty mellow. The mama bear had laid down, and the cub was, I don't know, doing whatever. But I was able to get a little video. I'm much better at seeing things with my eyes than I am with my phone. And so
interesting. Wow.
I can't seem to zero in on it. So I saw the bear, and on my phone, when I play back the video, it looks like I'm playing back a video of a bunch of leaves. But there's a couple of spots. There's a couple of spots where you can see the bears. So
aren't they amazing to see? Yes, aren't they incredible? Yeah. It's almost otherworldly. I know we see them in zoos and so on, but I always remember saying to someone, I saw the bears in the zoo, in the New York Zoo, and they were listless, they were tired. They were meant to be black bears, but they were brown and matted fur and so on. But in the wild, they look magnificent, don't they?
Yeah, and it just reminds you that you're in their world, so you
Absolutely.
have to be on your best behavior.
Absolutely. Now, did you? You also stayed at Uncle Johnny's, which I've never actually stayed here, and also Boots Off, which I loved. So you've done I'm just trying to think of where you are. Then, so you've done that bit where you see the waterfall. Can't remember the name. The falls.
Oh my!
Laurel
God.
Laurel Falls. Yeah.
That was an ordeal. It had poured. It had absolutely poured. It's just after Rome,
tough.
North Carolina.
Tough going down there. Then tough going down there.
It had poured, and so I looked on my phone, and it showed the radar showed that the bad weather was moving to our north, and 5 minutes later, deluge. And so I took the risk, and I went down to see the falls, down those endless rock steps.
Yes.
And they were just powerful and just awesome. But the trail, it looked like, was dry and passable. So I walked about 0.1 miles, and then you could see where it hugged that rock wall and was underwater.
Yes. Oh,
so
really?
With my full pack, I had to walk all the way back up the steps.
Oh dear, not.
But it was really incredible.
Yeah. Did you go in the water? I did.
No.
I stripped off and went in. I went in as a swim.
Yeah. That would have been great, except that that would have been dangerous. The river was so fast and so high. It would not be something. In fact, we were worried. Cough Drop and Dragonfly and I were worried about the fact that rivers will often crest some time after a big rainfall, and we were camped right by the river. It was loud. It was roaring all night. We were thinking, well, what if this river starts to crest? We're only about 10, 15 feet away from the bank, but.
So you went over Rome Mountain, so have you been? You've been over Rome Mountain. You went to Carver's Gap, which is about 5,500 feet. I'll never forget that, or 5,200 feet, something like that. And then you go over these beautiful balds, don't you?
Oh.
That's one of my favourite spots. Talk us through that.
So my favorite, so first of all, it was another day when it had poured, and we were all jammed into the High Knob Shelter, Roan High Knob Shelter, which is this 2-story, fully enclosed. Yeah. We were all miserable. But the next day, the weather was really nice. And so the best view, I thought, was over Little Hump Mountain.
Same here.
And then it had been a while. I wasn't going to go over Hump Mountain. So there's a saddle or a col between the two. And so that's where I camped that night. And then the next day, the top of Hump Mountain was encased in cloud, and it was
what a shame.
It was cold. It was really windy, and but it was okay. But the view from Little Hump was just gorgeous.
Well, it's the view of Hump Mountain from Little Hump is the one that is forever in my mind. Whatever I even saw on the West Highland Way, there's this thing called Conic Hill, which is a small hill, but it has the same look of Hump Mountain, but much smaller. And when you go to where is it? To Woods Hole Hostel in Petersburg, if you do go there, they've got a book with a fantastic picture of Hump Mountain, one of my favourite places on the trail, as I say. And you stayed at the Rome Mountain B&B, which did you stay for the breakfast there?
Yes. Well, yeah, I
awesome.
did. It was Anne and Steve was just great hosts.
Lovely. They're lovely, absolutely lovely. Well, you're going great. So going back home now. So when do you expect to restart? We're calling on. I'm speaking to you on Saturday, June the 4th, and you're probably going to get back Wednesday-ish, I guess.
I'll be at the latest. I'll be hiking back on trail on Friday.
All right. Okay. Great. Well, look, enjoy your drive, enjoy your family, enjoy your graduation, but don't forget you've got to get those legs moving again when you get back.
Oh, I know. I'm on my now third pair of boots.
Really?
The boots that I had gotten, the sole is already starting to delaminate. It's only been 2 or 3 weeks.
Good
so
Lord.
I'm going to return those and finally get a pair of lightweight trail runner type shoes.
Okay.
So
right.
I'm gonna wear those at the gym while I'm home on the treadmill, just to give them get myself.
And I see when we try to record just before we're using the phone now, but when we try to record using Squadcast, you've got a good beard going on. Are you going to keep that for the graduation? Tidy yourself up.
I don't know. I might tidy myself up and then restart.
That's right. Do that.
It's a good look, but I don't know that it's. I definitely want my family to experience the me with a beard, but I don't know if they're going to have an appetite for that too long.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. You sound like you're still having a great time, which is lovely. I'm really pleased. And a lot of our class haven't had a great time this year on the trail, so I'm so pleased that you're really, getting out there and you're going to get back to it. What are your expectations now, Dom? What's your plan? Because it's now early June. You've still got plenty of time. But what are you expecting to happen in the next couple of months?
Funny you should ask. So last night at dinner, RX and just Kevin and I were sitting around and we're trying to calculate what we needed to do. So my miles at the beginning, I was like 6 or 7 miles a day.
Sure.
And now I'm maybe 10 to 12. 16 with a full pack has been my longest, 21 with slack packing. But we calculated that assuming 6 hiking days out of 7 for the rest of the season to the end of September, we'd have to do about 17 miles a day.
Wow.
Which it feels like it may be unrealistic for me. And that may
I don't think it is, Dom. I don't think it is. The reason I say that, it's okay. Certainly in quite a few of the states you've got to come, you can do that. Your problem's going to be the White Mountains, it's going to be New Hampshire and Maine generally in terms of keeping those miles going. But I can well see you getting to 18 to 20, so quite a few days. But to do that for 6 days out of 7, that's quite significant as well. So So sorry, I was just about to say, you're just going to have to adapt on the fly, aren't you?
Yeah, I think that's actually one of the lessons. So what I'm going to say at graduation, I'm going to tell people about the 5 things I've learned in the first 500 miles of the AT. So I'm still working on that.
You must have what they are roughly. So this won't come out till next Thursday. So you can say it now because you would have done the graduation. So what are they?
So what are they? Number 1 is do not prejudge people. Let people unfold and enrich your life. I mean, there's so many people. You think we should know that? You would think we should know that by now, wouldn't you? But you're right, absolutely right. Yeah. Right. That's number 1. Number 2 is when someone offers you help, take it, be grateful for it, and pay it forward. Number 3, and this is in no order. Number 3 is lighten your load, both literally and figuratively. Number 4, which for me is very personal, is don't neglect your physical well-being. If I were in better physical condition when I started this, I would have had a much better start to it. I'm having a great time, but I would have had a much better start to my hike had I been in better physical shape. And then 5th is make sure that your family and your friends whom you're going to be away from for a long time are going to be know that you care about them, you love them, and you appreciate them.
That is so cool. Yeah.
Being flexible, that I may work that in as well. And then the bonus one is never quit on a bad day.
Yes, that's an important one as well. It's surprisingly important because there are so many times we just kind of want to give up, and I certainly did that on the John Muir Trail last year. Well, look, I think they're valuable lessons anyway, and I'm sure you'll continue to learn lessons when you get back as well. Well, have a great time at the graduation. I'm sure that your students will be delighted to see you, and good luck back on the trail, and just stay in touch, okay?
I will, Steve. Thanks a lot for giving a call and pursuing it despite our lack of connection here.
Not at all. Not at all. You take it easy, okay?
All right. Take care. Talk to you later.
Then. Bye.
Yep. Bye-bye.
Bye. So, with a bit of luck, by the time you hear this, Dom will be one of our surviving class of 2022 hikers still on course. I do hope that being a member of this Mighty Blue class of 22 hasn't been a curse for the hikers out there, but as we all know, pitching up at Springer and setting out is a huge step on your journey, but absolutely no guarantee of getting to the end. I'm just glad that we've still got some skin in the game. Just a bit of a programming note. Remember Nathan and Kim Wright being on the show a few weeks ago? Well, I offered the podcast to a counter view, and we've got one. In fact, Jeff Hayes will put his case for why not Alabama. Then Nathan will be on and they'll debate the issue. It was a really respectful and worthwhile conversation. I hope that you'll get a kick out of it and educated on it at the same time. So watch out for that next Thursday. Finally today, George Stefanos on his 1983 through hike of the Appalachian Trail is about to enter the Smokies. A bit of trivia. This is the only episode that we've ever had that finishes with a bleeped out curse word. I'll see you next week. Chapter 3, The Darklands. Fontana Dam, North Carolina to Davenport Gap, the North Carolina-Tennessee border, the Smokies. Tuesday, the 17th of May, 1983, mile 171.3. Our brief fellowship has come to a parting of the ways. Today, Dave and I entered the vast Great Smoky Mountains National Park. As no dogs are allowed, Ron and Sonny remained behind at the Fontana Hilton, awaiting a ride tomorrow to Davenport Gap on the other side of the Smokies. Those long shelter nights will not be the same without them, but there is hope for a memorable reunion. Thus far, all of the trail towns have been in dry counties, that is, after all, the Bible Belt. Hot Springs, North Carolina, our next supply point, is reputed to be wet. With any luck, taking into account Ron's slow, steady crawl, Dave and I should catch up with him again by Hot Springs. It should be fairly interesting to be with maniacs like Ron and Dave in a town with bars. Look out. Note, no bars in Hot Springs, at least in 1983. I think there was a state liquor store, though. We had one final round of storytelling last night. As the glowing joints made their way around the shelter and we grew stoned, Ron shared a story about the day when his brother took him food shopping for the trip. Ron, a complete backpacking novice, watched in bewilderment as his brother filled the cart with all sorts of strange provisions. Finally, when he dropped a box of saltines on top, Ron had to ask him what the hell that was for. Roughage, was the firm, terse reply. Ron also questioned the need for tang, but now he cannot do without it. He never carries water on his hikes. He carries massive amounts of tang, which he mixes in every time he fills his canteen. He definitely travels to the beat of a different drum, but that is just one of the quirks that makes him fascinating. This self-proclaimed lifelong couch potato has done quite well for himself. He has now packed 170 miles. That is a hell of an accomplishment, even though it's taken him a month to do it. On the rare occasions when things would grow quiet, Ron would suddenly shout out, "Roughage!" and we would all begin giggling again. Perhaps you had to hear him tell the story in order to appreciate this, especially after you had just smoked 3 joints with him. Later, Ron began mixing in his other favourite backpacking necessities: tang, oatmeal, coffee, beer nuts, cigarettes. Dave told a story, the events in which transpired years ago on his first trip to the Smokies. He was sleeping in one of the shelters one night at a time prior to the installation of the bear fences in front of the open side. A bear came in and tried to get at a thru hiker's food supply. The hiker stood up and shined his flashlight directly into the bear's eyes, sending him retreating out of the shelter. This entire sequence was repeated 2 more times. Finally, being smarter than the average bear, Yogi had a brainstorm and began to back into the lean-to, heading once again for those picnic baskets. The thru hiker grabbed a frying pan and dealt that bear a resounding whack across the butt. Yogi ran out, never to return that night. Nothing comes between a thru hiker and his food. Dave, Ron and I needed to make another trip into Fontana Village this morning, having forgotten several vital items yesterday afternoon. We set out to walk the 3 miles from the shelter to the village. After about a half mile, one of the Fontana Village sheriffs pulled over and gave Dave and me a ride into town. He was not allowed to have dogs in the car, so Ron and Sonny had to walk all the way in. Once again, I felt a mixed welcome in Fontana. Every place of business had a sign in its window informing us that backpacks were not allowed inside. Many of the upper middle-class tourists bestowed upon us the friendly countenances they reserve for derelicts. Nevertheless, the stores did not seem to mind taking our money. We did meet a few friendly people, though, and no one was outright rude to us. Maybe it was my imagination. After devouring a large breakfast with Dave in the cafeteria, I stopped at the post office for a padded envelope in which to mail home the 2 rolls of exposed film which had been overlooked when I sent the return package yesterday. At the store, I picked up several forgotten items, the most important being a small container of baby powder. My chubby thighs had been chafed raw and hairless by long hours of steamy hiking, and various other appendages were not exactly thriving in their endless sweat baths. I also purchased a nutritious second breakfast of Coke and potato chips for a little al fresco dining at one of a small group of tables outside. I finally made my way back to the shelter. No rides, so it was another 3-mile walk in Fontana. You would not think this would bother me, what with all the walking I'm already doing on this trip, but my legs and the bloody stumps I use for feet have only so many miles in them on any given day, and I hoard these like a miser. Wasting them on road walks, not part of the official Appalachian Trail mileage, frustrates the hell out of me. At the shelter, I loaded my pack and followed the AT over paved TVA roads for a 1/4 mile to the dam. I found the building housing the public showers and spent almost an hour in one, my first since Franklin. The US government has my sincere gratitude for this thoughtful gesture. An especially nice touch was a mirror in the shower stall. I enjoyed my first shave since Wallace Inn in Georgia, right in the store. It was a pleasure to rid myself of that growth, even though I had adroitly managed to gouge my lower lip and it bled like a stuck pig. By the time Dave and I trod the concrete footway across the long dam, it was 1:15. On the far side of Fontana Lake, the Appalachian Trail followed paved roads along the shore for a half mile before turning into the woods for the long, gruelling climb up a spur ridge of the Smokies. When we finally reached the fire tower on the top of the Shuckstack Mountain, there was an incredible 360-degree view of western North Carolina's mountain ranges to the east and North Carolina-Tennessee state line ridgecrest of the Smokies to the west. 2 hikers we met there, who were on their way down into Fontana, told us of a severe rat problem at Molly's Ridge Shelter, where we intended to stay tonight. We decided to stop at Birch Spring Shelter and make today a short day. Russell Field Shelter, the next one past Molly's Ridge, was 8 miles away, and it was already 4 o'clock. To be assured of a place inside a shelter each night, you must be one of the first 3 through hikers to arrive. The other 9 or so spots are reserved by short-term hikers whose permits state specifically at which shelter they are to stay each night. We do not want to take any chances in these crowded mountains, so we will have to leave early, get our miles in, and arrive at our chosen shelters early in the afternoon. Birch Spring Shelter is a sty, but it's our home tonight. The floor is an odorous mire of oily black mud. I've already seen at least 10 mice scurrying around, so I may not get too much sleep tonight. There's not enough food in my pack for them and me. On the other hand, the water supply is not too dirty, and the wire bunks are in pretty good shape. There is room for 12 people, and we're the only ones there. It is 8 o'clock, and I'm going to lie down. Dave and I are shooting for 15.2 miles tomorrow to Derek Nobb's shelter. I'm really looking forward to getting going again after covering only 45.6 miles in the last 5 days. I had a lot of fun, but now I want mileage. Wednesday the 18th of May 1983, mile 186.5. From Georgia to Virginia run long, intricate strands of interconnected mountain ranges, bordered by the main fork of the Blue Ridge on the east, and another fork far to the west. The deep gorges of mountain rivers such as the Little Tennessee divide this western fork into a series of separate mountain ranges. Their ridgelines form the meandering border of North Carolina and Tennessee. The Great Smokies are the loftiest of these border ranges, running more than 70 miles from the Little Tennessee to the Big Pigeon River. We had been climbing along an eastern spur of the Smokies since the dam and had not yet attained the main crest. At 8:15 in the morning, we started out to cover the remaining 2 miles along the spur ridge to the state line ridge at Doe Knob. The hike was relatively easy. We had already done the bulk of the climb on Tuesday. From Doe Knob, a long, fairly steep descent into Econeatley Gap was followed by a frequently steep 1-mile climb up to Molly's Ridge shelter, where we filled our canteens and rested for 15 minutes. The next step was another climb, a quick ascent of a summit called the Devil's Tater Patch. I could have used some of those spuds just then. I'd already burnt most of my breakfast calories and was damned hungry, but it was all just a cruel hoax. A lot of ups and downs along a rolling stretch of ridge crests brought us to Russell Field Shelter, a beautiful spot. Years ago, before these mountains became a national park, folks used to farm their ridge crests. The old farm fields have now been reclaimed by the patient forest, but trees covering them grow less densely and the woods are airier than the surrounding forests. The shelter was situated in a grassy, park-like wooded area where many of the trees were thick with tiny bright buds. Dave and I spent 40 minutes up there, walking around and just relaxing. I shot my first pictures since Shuckstack's fire tower. A short while later, we hit the nicest spot I'd seen up to that point in the Smokies. A grassy little rolling meadow atop a knob called Little Bald. Although we had not planned it, Dave and I wound up having lunch there and staying for about an hour. The sun was shining and the air remained pleasantly cool. Of course, the pretty little redhead we met up there had absolutely nothing to do with the long break. It never did get hot all day. I took a few photographs of the views from Little Bald, although the air was becoming rather hazy. After lunch, we had a long, steep climb up Thunderhead, an impressive mountain with large open expanses along the crest. There were some good views, especially from the smaller west peak aptly named Rocky Top. I shot some good pictures up there, but dark clouds were quickly moving in and we had no time to linger. A scattering of fat raindrops began to fall on us and we made our way down the other side. Soon the sun was gone, the wind was whirling and the temperature was plummeting. We flew over the last 4 miles to Derek Nobb's shelter. Immediately upon my arrival, I threw on my long pants, chamois shirt and wool sweater. The balmy afternoon had given way to a rather tempestuous night. Derek Nobb was the first completely full shelter Dave and I had encountered since we started on the Appalachian Trail. 10 other backpackers were already here when we arrived. They all seemed like good people, so this was not at all an unpleasant experience. The shelter is in an excellent spot, similar in appearance to Russell Field. About a dozen small deer are wandering around nibbling the grass and the lower leaves, and they let me approach surprisingly close. It's pretty amazing how brave the deer are in the national parks where no hunting is allowed. As I followed the side trail down to the spring to get water for my dinner, one walked past me on the trail, close enough for me to touch. After dinner, Dave and I found ourselves talking to a nice couple from Louisville, Kentucky, named Steve and Diane. Their backpacks were outside the shelter, as they were going to pitch a tent outside for the night in order to escape the crowded shelter. As we talked, a small raccoon started messing with the packs. Steve went outside, walked right up to the brazen little bastard, and gazed sternly down at him. The coon stared back in motionless insolence, a calm, defiant glare of which any human juvenile delinquent would be proud. Finally, he waddled over to a nearby spot where 2 other backpackers were cleaning up their dinner pots and dishes. He watched them work for a while, fascinated. They chuckled warmly at his charming cuteness, until he suddenly lunged, grabbed a dish and a spoon, and sprinted away. They had to chase him for more than 100 yards before he ditched the booty and took off into the thicker woods surrounding the old field. They returned to the shelter, grinning sheepishly. It's tough to look cool after chasing down a criminal who weighs all of 10 pounds. As darkness fell, Dave and I helped Steve and Diane gather wood for and build a nice fire. Through hikers do not often bother with such amenities. We're usually too tired, but the night just seemed to call for one. As we sat around the shelter's fireplace, enjoying the warm flames, Dave pulled out some pot and expressed a wish that he had a bowl. Steve produced one from his pocket, and we all got pretty blown away. I went to bed at 10 o'clock and slept like a stone until 7 o'clock. I'm actually writing this entry on Thursday morning, having been too lazy to do it last night. A solid mass of water was falling from the clouds when I awoke. It's still pouring. I do not know what Dave and I will wind up doing today. The howling wind is lashing the rain sideways at times. As it's still just 7:30 and we were planning a short 13-mile day to Mount Collins Shelter, we're going to sit tight for a while and see if conditions improve. It will be much easier to make breakfast after this place clears out a bit anyway. Thursday the 19th of May 1983, mile 193.6. Things began to look bleak. I'm already running out of solid food, and today's storm turned out to be a monster. Dave and I managed to walk 7 miles to Double Springs Gap Shelter, and that was it. Now I'll be forced to stretch my food supply for an extra day, and the marijuana-induced munches that hit me last night did not help the situation. I don't know what the hell was on my mind when I planned provisions for this stretch of trail. I gave far too much thought to pack weight and completely zoned out of the caloric requirements of backpacking the loftiest mountain range on the Appalachian Trail. We waited until noon before starting our hike, but the rain and the wind and the cold hard strong all day. The trail was covered with a rich clay soil, which the deluge had transformed into a sea of mud, bottomless and clinging on the flats and thin and tractionless on the slopes. Walking them was like walking on ice. A half-mile climb felt like a mile when my feet kept slipping back a half-step downhill for each step I climbed. I'm more exhausted after today's 7 miles than I was after yesterday's 15. Worst of all, I'm still 41 miles from Davenport Gap and the small grocery store located near the Appalachian Trail road crossing there. There were some extremely tough stretches on the trail, most especially the open summit of Silas Bald and the crest of a narrow, knife-edge ridge traversed by the 80 soon afterwards. Both would have been scenic and not terribly difficult on a more clement day, but today was far from clement. Days like these have their own warped charm and personality. They make for more interesting stories afterwards than the nice ones, but a wee dram of this sort of thing goes a long way towards satisfying one's appetite for adventure. About 5.5 miles into the day, I was hiking by myself, some distance behind Dave. I stopped at Silas Bald's shelter in order to sit down, take a rest, and just get out of the rain for a while. Although it was early in the afternoon, the brutal weather had already packed the place with hikers. All of the shelters in the Smokies have a wire bear fence enclosing the open side, with a narrow opening to allow people to enter. This one was blocked by somebody's backpack. I stood there, exhausted and hypothermic, for about a minute, waiting for the owner of the pack to move it out of the way. Everybody in the shelter just sat or lay there unmoving, staring at me. Finally I asked, "Whose pack is this?" No one answered. I asked again, same result. Now I was angry. I almost shouted the question when I had to repeat it for the third time. Just as I was about to kick the damn thing out of my way and start beating on all the adult males in that shelter, figuring that I would eventually work my way round to the right one, the man who owned that pack and had been standing less than 3 feet away from it for all of this time snapped out of his lethargic stupor and moved it out of my way. The thing that gets me is that jerk must have just gone through exactly the same misery that I've been enduring today. Only a person who has experienced a day that miserable can understand just how thoughtless and inconsiderate this guy was. I'm attempting to change and grow as a person while hiking this trail, but looking back, the guy kind of deserved a beating, and I wish that I'd given it to him. Running into these morons was an even more unpleasant experience because I had the memory of all those great people I'd met last night. I'm glad I moved on to the next shelter to spend tonight. Dave and I are lodging tonight with another great crew. The shelter is not as crowded as Derek Knob last night, which is a definite plus. One of the nicest things about short-term hikers is that they always seem to have the ambition and the inclination to put forth the effort of building a nice roaring fire at the end of the day. Even tonight, with saturated wood, some of them have done so. Dave and I had temporarily exhausted all of our Boy Scout ambitions on last night's blaze, but we did join the damp and steaming circle around this one. I do not know the names of any of our shelter companions, but we're having a good time together, and that is all that matters. One fella turned Dave and me on to some good, strong hashish. Another offered Dave and me some gin. I thought the night just too miserable to be compelled to venture outside several times to water the grass, but Dave cheerfully accepted. Later on, he was forced to spend a good deal of time out in the cold, wind-driven rain. Being a true friend, I only broke his chops about that for an hour. I thought that my months on the trail would take me away from partying for a while, but the people I'm meeting on the Appalachian Trail are as crazy as the ones I hang around with at home. I just wish I'd become prepared for this with more food. The situation is growing critical. I'm out of granola bars, candy bars and Pop-Tarts, virtually all of my munchy food. I still have small amounts of crackers, peanut butter and rice. My freeze-dried beef is holding out well, as are my sugar, tea and oatmeal. The tang is almost gone, but there's still plenty of instant milk. Dave's situation is no better. A parting gift from Steve and Diane this morning of a large bag of peanuts is saving our butts for the moment. Diane also gave me some homemade potato bread at dinner last night. They were excellent people, like the vast majority of those I've met on the Appalachian Trail. I remember an account by an 80 thru hiker in a book that I read before starting this trip. He wrote that, while on his hike, he could not stand to be around anybody not a fellow thru hiker. That was his loss. I hear that the weather is supposed to be much better over the next couple of days. If we can make it 20.6 miles tomorrow to Peck's Corner Shelter, our supply problems should be workable. From there, it is a 19.6-mile hike to Davenport Gap Shelter the next day, where we can leave our backpacks and walk the 2-mile round trip to the store. The wind and the rain have both died down considerably as night has fallen. Hopefully, the forecast is correct. If it isn't, we're